So this is the first WIFDN webinar of the year. This is the 4th annual webinar series, and we'd like to welcome you on board. Just so you get a sense of who's actually talking to you today, my name is Ann Pierce, and I'm the WIFDN coordinator. And Mark Renz is here as well. He's our extension weed specialist, and he's manning the chat box for us today. So today we're just going to give a brief introduction to WIFDN for those of you who have not participated in WIFDN activities before. And then we'll have a series of guest speakers talking about what to look for in 2017. You probably saw this on the schedule, and we'll introduce each speaker when they're ready to come on. So WIFDN is a statewide citizen science network that's focused on invasive species detection and education. So we've been working around the state going into our 4th year now, trying to get people to detect and report invasive species and just learn more about invasive species in general. And this invasion curve illustrates why we exist in the first place. So when a species is first introduced to an area, it's generally occupying a pretty small area and it hasn't been around for very long. If we're lucky, we detect it when it still hasn't spread to too large of an area. But typically, the public doesn't become aware of invasive species and doesn't act on them until the amount of area infested by the species has really increased. And of course, that means that the cost to control or manage those species has really shot up as well. So WIFDN was developed to train citizen science volunteers to learn how to identify and report invasive species so that we can detect the species early enough to be able to control them at a reasonable cost. WIFDN works on a couple of different things. So we work with partners around the state to train citizen scientists. We do that through things like this webinar series. We also facilitate in-person workshops with partners around the state. And we really want to be a resource for everybody, citizen scientists and other people, to learn about invasive species. On the other end, our citizen science volunteers help out by attending our trainings. So some of you are using this webinar as a training. Some of you will hopefully be able to attend in-person trainings as well. And then you do volunteer work around the state and report those activities to us. And we really depend on our volunteers to report their activities so that we can show our funders the impact that you're having, so we can continue to get funding and continue to provide these trainings and resources for free. Some additional resources that we have, in addition to the webinar training and the in-person workshops, include a series of videos on our website, and these cover a variety of topics from invasive species ID, monitoring, management. We have recordings of past webinars, so if this is your first year joining the webinar series, you can view what you've missed in the past. We also support a number of volunteer projects, and as the season starts ramping up, we'll be putting information about those projects on the website. To give you a sense of what WIFDN has accomplished in its first 3 years, from 2014 to 2016, we've had nearly 800 participants attend in-person trainings led by WIFDN staff and partners. Over 150 people have been trained via our webinar series over those first 3 years, and we've had nearly 6,000 views of the videos posted on our website. More importantly, though, is the impact from our volunteers. So in our first 3 seasons, we had over 5,500 hours reported by volunteers dedicated to monitoring and managing invasive species, and they drove nearly 9,000 miles to accomplish that. We also have had nearly 3,000 invasive species reports submitted through the Great Lakes Early Detection Network smartphone app, which is our primary reporting tool for our citizen scientists. A number of our volunteers also participate in a Cerceris wasp survey. So the Cerceris wasp is a native wasp that nests in sandy locations like the infield of a baseball diamond, and they collect metallic wood-boring beetles like the emerald ash borer. So by surveying baseball diamonds for Cerceris wasp nests, volunteers have been able to collect insects, and some of them are identified as emerald ash borer. So in our first 3 years, our volunteers helped survey 384 baseball diamonds. They collected 656 insects, And in 2014 to 2015, 75 of those insects were identified as emerald ash borer. I'd also like to give you a sense of where our volunteers are located. So this is a map of everybody who reported volunteer hours just for 2016. So obviously in some of our lower population areas of the state, we don't have as many volunteers, so we'd like to see some people sign on and start submitting reports. Speaking of reports, these are where the reports came in from on the Great Lakes Early Detection Network app for 2016. So each, the numbers in the circle represent the number of individual reports in an area. And then finally, for the Cerceris Survey, we've been involved with this for the past 3 years. So this is a map of all of the sites that have been surveyed in the Cerceris Survey over the 3 years. So they've clearly been to a lot of baseball fields. Over the past year, we've been really focused on expanding our audience by partnering with nature centers and classrooms. So with that, we've been able to conduct a number of trainings with nature centers and getting volunteers to help nature center staff monitor on their own lands. Later this summer, we're going to focus a bit more on agricultural and aquatic weeds. So on the agricultural side, we'll be looking at water hemp and Palmer amaranth, which are both pigweeds. And on the aquatic side, we'll be looking at water lettuce, water hyacinth, and hydrilla. And we'll be developing some resources for all of those species and hopefully some new volunteer opportunities as well. Later today, I'm sure you'll hear about a few of those aquatic plants from Paul Skowinski. So before we dive into our first guest speaker, just so we're all on the same page, we'll define invasive species for the day. So an invasive species is a species that originated elsewhere, so it's not native to the area. It's growing or spreading rapidly in its new area, and it causes or has the potential to cause harm, and that includes economic and environmental harm and harm to human health.